The HOA tried to shut down my home office, claiming I was in violation of zoning laws. What they didn't realize, I'm the guy who wrote those laws. While they were drafting violation letters, I was sitting on the original legal framework they were misquoting. I'm a city planner by trade, spent over a decade crafting zoning laws designed to protect homeowners and support small businesses. When I moved into this quiet, well-kept neighborhood, I wasn't looking for a fight. I wanted peace, a place to work from home and live without interference. But the HOA had other ideas. One day I got a notice taped to my door. Unauthorized business activity on residential property. They were talking about my home office, the same home office that had been up and running for 2 years without a single complaint. They threatened me with daily fines, legal action, and even removal of my entire workspace. What they didn't know was that the very zoning code they were trying to use against me, I wrote it. Every clause, every exception, they were quoting my own words back to me, incorrectly, so I pushed back. Politely at first. But when I showed them the truth, the HOA president absolutely lost it. And what she did next? That's when things got wild. First came the letters. Thick envelopes stamped with the HOA's insignia like they were court summons. Notice of violation, they read in bold, threatening type. They cited obscure clauses, half of which didn't even apply to single-family residential lots. At first I laughed. I thought it was a misunderstanding. A simple phone call would clear it up. But it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was the beginning of a full-blown campaign. They escalated, fast. I started noticing cars slowing down in front of my house. A man I'd never seen before got out one morning and began walking around my property, clipboard in hand, snapping photos through the side yard. Another day, someone stood right outside my home office window, holding up a phone, filming me while I was mid-Zoom call. No doorbell, no introductions, just surveillance. Then came the violations, one after another. They accused me of running a commercial business in a residential zone, of having excessive computer equipment visible from the street. I've got 2 monitors, a desk lamp, and a plant. But suddenly, that was cause for concern. Next came the noise complaints. Ironically, I work in complete silence. No music, no clients, no foot traffic, just me, zoning maps, and municipal code. But that didn't matter. The HOA claimed neighbors were disturbed. No names, no evidence, just fabricated statements filed behind closed doors. I requested to meet with the board. Thought maybe if they heard from me directly, I could clear the air. Instead, I was given a 5-minute time slot at the end of their next monthly meeting. I showed up, documents in hand. They barely looked up. Karen, the HOA president, checked her phone while I spoke. When I referenced the actual zoning code and cited exceptions that protected home-based businesses like mine, she interrupted me, said I was not qualified to interpret legal language. That's when I realized she didn't know who I was. Karen didn't know that I had authored the zoning ordinance that governed not just this neighborhood, but the entire district. I had helped craft the language, reviewed it with attorneys, sat through public hearings, and now she was trying to weaponize it against me, based on half-truths and personal vendettas. The hypocrisy was unbearable, because while they were dissecting every inch of my home office, Karen was running a full-blown salon out of her garage. No permits, no inspections. I'd seen the clients pulling up, the hairdryer cords hanging out of the garage door, the sandwich board signs she rolled out on Saturdays. The board didn't say a word about that. No complaints, no violation letters. She operated freely while I was being punished for simply doing quiet legal work from my own home. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about zoning. It wasn't about rules or codes. It was about control. Karen didn't like the idea of someone she couldn't push around. And when she felt challenged, she came for blood. She leveraged the HOA's authority like a personal army, weaponizing policy to harass, intimidate, and force compliance through fear. But what she didn't realize was that I wasn't just another homeowner with a printer and a desk in the corner. I had the knowledge, the receipts, and a detailed understanding of every loophole and exemption she had just tripped over. So I started documenting everything, every letter, every visit, every fake violation. I pulled records, logged timestamps, compared citations, and then I started looking into them. into the HOA board, their finances, their voting records, their personal businesses. And what I found made my blood boil. Dozens of violations, real ones, sitting unaddressed. Board members ignoring their own regulations, pocketing reimbursements without receipts, bending the rules for themselves and their friends while punishing others with zero due process. It was a pattern, a system of selective enforcement designed to reward loyalty and punish dissent. They thought I'd just take it, that I'd get tired, move out, shut down. Instead, I doubled down. I wasn't just going to defend my home office. I was going to expose the rotten foundation this HOA was built on. The more I dug, the clearer it became. Karen wasn't just incompetent, she was corrupt. And the deeper she tried to bury me under fake fines and baseless complaints, the more evidence I gathered. I was done playing defense. It was time to flip the script. They thought they had me cornered, surrounded, outnumbered, like I was just some homeowner with a printer trying to play lawyer. Karen strutted around with her clipboard, waving violation letters like court orders, thinking she had me dead to rights. But what they didn't know? I had the receipts, literal ones. For weeks, I stayed quiet. Let them think they were winning. Let them file their bogus complaints and hold their secret meetings. I didn't argue. I documented. I prepared. I waited for the perfect moment, not to defend myself, but to pull the entire rug out from under them. Then came the special meeting. Karen called it herself. She said it was to resolve an ongoing zoning conflict involving a homeowner's misuse of residential property. She never used my name, but the smirk on her face made it clear this meeting had one target: me. I showed up with a binder, 3 inches thick, every tab labeled, every page highlighted. I sat quietly at the back while Karen gave her speech. She droned on about community standards, preserving neighborhood integrity, and unauthorized commercial activity. When she finally called me up to speak, I didn't say a word at first. I just placed the binder on the table in front of the board. I opened it to the first page, a certified copy of the original zoning ordinance, the one I helped write. My name was in the acknowledgments. I flipped to Section 4, subsection C, home-based work exceptions, and there it was in black and white. Clear legal language stating that low-impact home occupations, like remote consulting, digital services, and freelance planning, were permitted uses in residential zones. As long as there was no signage, no customer traffic, no public nuisance, it was 100% compliant. And guess who had signed off on that language during the final revision phase? Karen. Her signature was right there, on the public record, dated 3 years ago. Not only had she approved it, she had voted for it as part of the city's HOA advisory committee. I had the minutes. I had the motion. I had the receipts. When I slid the document across the table, the room went silent. Karen looked down, eyes scanning the page. She blinked. Once. Twice. Her fingers tightened around her pen. Then she looked up, face pale, lips pressed thin. For the first time since this mess started, she had nothing to say. Because in that moment, she realized she wasn't just wrong, she was exposed. She hadn't just misinterpreted the rules. She had attempted to weaponize a law she herself had helped approve against the very person who had written it, and now everyone in that room knew it. I didn't stop there. I laid out the timeline, the letters, the surveillance, the fabricated complaints, the selective enforcement. Then I opened another tab in my binder, detailing her unpermitted home salon, photos, witness accounts, screenshots of social media ads. It was all there. Then I dropped the final page on the table, a formal complaint I had already filed with the city zoning board against her. Karen wasn't just dealing with a homeowner anymore. She was facing a professional who had built these regulations from the ground up, and who knew exactly how to dismantle the weak spots she thought she could hide behind. The board sat stunned. Some avoided eye contact. One even closed their laptop. Karen tried to pivot, mumbled something about interpretive ambiguity and community values. But it was too late. The damage was done. She knew it. I knew it. And so did everyone else in that room. The power had shifted. I wasn't on defense anymore. I was leading the narrative now. And Karen? She was scrambling to contain the fallout, because the moment she saw that clause, her own signature staring back at her, she understood just how deep a hole she had dug. This wasn't just a policy mistake, it was a public unraveling, and we were just getting started. At the next HOA meeting, I came prepared, not just to defend myself, but to burn the entire charade to the ground. I didn't walk in angry, I walked in calm, focused. I'd spent weeks organizing every document, every timestamp, every inconsistency. I had binders and backup binders, copies for every board member. And just for good measure, copies for the neighbors too. The room was packed, more than usual. Word had gotten around that something was going down. People showed up with coffee and folding chairs like it was a front row seat to the fall of an empire. I took my place quietly at the front, nodded to the board, and asked if I could speak. Karen tried to move past me. "We have a full agenda," she said. I simply smiled. "Then let's not waste any time." I handed out packets, highlighted zoning code, original ordinance drafts, HOA meeting minutes, even screenshots of Karen's vote in favor of the very clause that protected my home office. The room went quiet as people flipped through the pages. Then I read it aloud, word for word. Section 4, subsection C, home-based occupation exemptions. Residents may conduct low-impact, non-retail work from within the home, provided there is no signage, no client traffic, and no disturbance to the neighborhood. I paused, looked up. Everything I have done falls within these parameters. My work creates no noise, no visitors, no external modifications. And best of all, this clause, this protection, was approved by your very own HOA advisory rep, Karen Johnson. I turned the page. Signed August 3rd, 3 years ago. There was a moment, a perfect cinematic beat, where Karen went absolutely still, her face drained of color, her mouth opened slightly, as if she had something to say but couldn't quite find the words. Around the room, murmurs began to ripple. One neighbor raised an eyebrow, another leaned forward. Then came the spark that lit it all up. From the back row, someone asked, loud enough for the entire room to hear, "So, how's your garage salon legal then?" Boom, it hit like a bomb. The energy in the room flipped. Karen turned sharply, scanning for who said it, but she couldn't find them fast enough. Eyes darted from the pages in their hands to her. The double standard was on full display. She'd tried to find me for 2 monitors and a desk, while running a full cash business out of her garage. Blow dryers, customer traffic, signage, every violation she'd accused me of, she was guilty of tenfold. Karen stammered, tried to pivot. "My situation is different. I've had verbal permission," but it was over. Another neighbor cut her off. "So you get verbal permission, and you fine this guy for following written law?" "Nah, Karen, that doesn't fly anymore." There was clapping, actual clapping. Even the board members started to shift in their seats. The treasurer leaned back and crossed his arms. One of the newer board members, someone I barely knew, asked to review my documentation on the spot. I handed it over. Karen tried to wrap the meeting early. "This isn't productive," she said. But it was too late. The curtain had been pulled. The neighbors weren't just listening. They were questioning, asking for audits, requesting transparency. Everything she'd kept quiet was coming into the light. 2 weeks later, an email went out to the neighborhood. Karen Johnson has formally resigned from her position as HOA president, effective immediately. No explanation. No goodbye. The following week, the board issued a formal apology to me. Every violation was voided, every fine dismissed, my record wiped clean, and in the strangest twist of all, the board offered to clarify the HOA guidelines to better align with municipal zoning. I smiled and declined, because I didn't need a clarification. I had the law on my side the entire time. Now, my home office runs without interference. I do my work, take my calls. No more spying, no more letters taped to my door. The HOA, once so eager to control, now sends me polite emails, and even asks for advice when reviewing zoning issues. Oh, and Karen, her salon? Shut down. Someone, I'm not saying who, may have forwarded some photos and zoning code to the city's code enforcement team. Turns out, when you build your kingdom on hypocrisy, it doesn't take much for it to collapse. Justice wasn't loud, it wasn't angry, it was quiet, professional, surgical, and it was absolutely satisfying. It started with a bogus violation, a petty attempt to bully me into submission over a home office that followed every rule. But by the end, the script had flipped. The HOA had to rewrite its policies. The queen bee, Karen, was dethroned, and for a brief moment, peace returned to the neighborhood. I thought it was over, until a new letter showed up in my mailbox. No envelope, just a folded paper with no return address. Same tone, same phrasing, different sender. That's when I realized Karen wasn't done. She may have lost the title, but she still had her claws in the system. And whatever game she was playing now, it was bigger, sneakier, and a whole lot messier than before. So if you thought this story was finished, it's not. You're going to want to hear what happened next. If you've ever dealt with HOA madness, hit like, subscribe, and drop your wildest HOA story in the comments. I might just feature it in the next one. Because trust me, the suburbs, they're wilder than they look.